now have Mr. Michelle's to talk about certification. Good morning, Mr. Michelle. How are you?
Good morning. Is this on? Okay.
Yep.
Apparently it's on.
You got a good mic.
I can't hear very well, so I'm sensitive to that kind of stuff. Good morning, Chair and board members. Second time we've met. When I last was here, and when I last addressed the board in May, the issue I took up with the board at the time was the fact that all the officer certifications were referencing a law that in fact did not exist. And in fact had not existed since 1979, and nobody seemed to have ever caught that. Well, I caught it, I brought it to the board. I think you probably didn't believe me, I was right. As a result of that, the LEA had been modifying their certifications. Problem. What they're doing is they're taking official certifications and they're photoshopping them. I don't think you could do that, Leo. I think there are ways you can modify an official document, but I don't think photoshopping is one of them. And that's what they've been doing, and I can prove it. So I think what they've done is they've made a mess worse to this point. Because now you've got a bunch of documents floating around that are on their face illegal. So, I hope my credibility improves slightly since I was right on that one. Well, I think I'm right on this one too, and this one is actually much more serious. It has to do with the way officers are certified in the state. I ran into this when I was doing some more research on those certifications. I've got a packet here that I will leave with the record of this meeting. A lot of this information I have sent to the board members on email. This is to put it in the public arena, so it'll be attached to some public minutes. First, this is the law. I hope you have all read it. Frankly, I rather doubt that you have. This is the law that governs the Law Enforcement Academy, statutes of the state of New Mexico. You should be familiar with it. Based upon what past education I've seen the directors of the academy give to new board members, you may well not be, because that's not something they seem to care about, teaching the new board members. It's important because in this law, and again, this shouldn't be news to you because I think I've been copying you on email on this law changed in 1993 in a crucial way, and it apparently never got incorporated into practice. The law changed in 1993. Prior to that, the director of the academy certified police officers. 1993, that changed. It was changed by Senate Bill 678. And it was brought by some people who were competent. Ann Riley, who had been a Law Enforcement Academy board member, and Mike Sanchez, the Michael Sanchez, who was later the Senate Majority Leader for many years. These people knew what they were doing, I believe. But, so they changed the law, and the law says, henceforth, the director of the academy will provide certificates of completion, not certificates, certificates of completion. Ever since 1993, the director could not issue a certification, and that's what they've been doing. And that's what the board has been letting them get away with. I mean, it's historic, and this is not uncommon in the law of New Mexico that we change the law and the practice doesn't follow. So what happens is, today, in this law, you, not the director, issue certificates, and that's been the case since 1983. So when the director, today, brings you certificates for ratification, that process is not supported by the law. The director can't certify the officers. And how can you ratify something that doesn't exist? There is no language in the law for the board ratifying anything. The term ratification does not exist in the law for this board. So what are you doing? And what will you do when today they bring you a list of certificates to be ratified? And I've just told you the certificates are illegal and have been for a very long time. Here's others. Problem with the certifications. I picked a few just to show you the depth of the problems that you have been certifying. This one you certified last time. It's a police officer from Santa Fe, David Bogan. This certificate, which I will leave with you, is illegal on its face. and this board certified it, or you ratified it. You ratified a certification that it certified this. This is an illegal certificate on its face. What makes David Bogut stand out is he's a cert by waiver. Cert by waivers by law cannot be certified unless they're employed by a police agency. David wasn't. He couldn't be certified until he was hired by a police agency when he was later hired by the Santa Fe Police Department. At the time that the certification was issued, he couldn't be certified. Yet it was signed off by the board, the chairman of the board, and the director. Here's another one, just a couple to illustrate the depth of the problem. This is a gentleman by the name of Aaron Poole. Sheriff Mendoza may recognize the name. Aaron Poole was not certified. Aaron Poole was, this is a certificate said he was certified on the 15th of May on 2019. I told you this problem with this certification, it can't be issued by the director, but he did issue it, and you, unfortunately, didn't even see it, because it wasn't brought to the board for ratification. This is part of Basic Police Officer Class 198. This class graduated in May. It was not brought even for ratification in May. It is not being brought today. What does it mean when an officer is certified by somebody who doesn't have any legal right to certify them and not even ratified, because that's what's happening. If you look at the agenda today, you'll find a gap right before CNN, right before the ratification of the Central New Mexico Academy. The reason the gap exists is that gap is Basic Police Officer 198. They dropped it. Not only have they dropped that class, they also dropped, in 2015, they dropped APD 113. They also dropped in 2015, they forgot to bring to the board 116. Where are those officers? Do they have legal certifications? And if so, what supports being legal? They haven't been ratified. They couldn't be certified by the person who certified them, and they haven't even been ratified in your current process. What is their status? They're out there. They think they're certified. Are they certified? How could they be? The last certificate I would offer you is here's a Michael Brown. He's certified. He's got a certification, but never ratified. He happens to be part of Class 113 that went missing. But listen, the reason I want to show you the law first is, the reason I think that they changed the law in 1993, they weren't happy with the way it was working, having the director certified. They were trying to get the board members to take responsibility for the certification process. The board apparently chose not to, in spite of the change in the law. But today, the law says the board, not the director, issues blah, 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 blah. That's all. And again, I'm leaving the law for you, but you can find it easily. And here's the other documents I would leave with you. 116, this is a list of all the officers that weren't ratified. They all got certifications. I've also got a list of, this is a list which includes APD 113, also never ratified. Questionable. They got certified. They all got certificates. I've seen it. I just showed you one. Never ratified. What are these officers on the street for? Not only those officers, CBW 87. Certified Waiver Class 87 also went missing. Southern New Mexico. Dr. Fonz's old hangar is, they have a class, no, I think of that, this is San Juan, this class went missing too. There's 85 officers on this list, which I got with an EPRA from the OEA. 85 officers who have never been ratified. What's their standing? Figure that one out. If we follow the law, then there's certifications.
Are there any questions for Mr. Michels?
Oh, one last thing and then I'll shut.
Sure, go ahead.
One more document. I found this one recently because of the difficulties that that former Chief Casadas was having over DPS, a lot of, the governor made a decision to allow some records out that had been, kept confidential. One of the records that it turned out and showed up in the journal was the lawsuit against the academy brought back in 2014. It's one of the ones that was the governor decided to release. You've got a copy of the first page of it right here. What it does is it lays out in great detail, you should all look at it, the destruction of the law enforcement academy in early 2013. And as board members, that is what you're dealing with. What you are dealing with as the incoming board members is you've got a huge problem with certification, and you've got a huge problem because the academy was destroyed. They just wiped out the staff back in 2013. And they've never recovered from that fact. It is up to you and the incoming director to recover the functioning of this academy to where they were prior to 2013 before they got destroyed.
Thank you, Mr. Michelle, for your presentation.
Appreciate
it. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Any questions?
Any questions? We'll take your comments that are advised. Appreciate it. Mr. Deputy Director, how are you?
Well, sir, how are you?
Excellent, excellent. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you. Item number 9 on the agenda, ratification for certification of law enforcement officers. Agenda item A, Western New Mexico certification, 18-0225-P through 19-0019-P. We would ratify that these individuals have met the requirements for certification and request the board ratify their certification.
Give me 1 second.
Yes, sir.
So I direct our board to item I, Exhibit A, 18-0225P to 19-0019P. Is that correct, Deputy Director?
That is correct.
Great. I will entertain a motion to approve Exhibit A.
Mr. Chairman, if I could clarify his request, because these numbers aren't through. It looks like there's numbers skipped. So
Correct. They're just exhibit A in its entirety is what we're voting for. If you please the board and the vice chair, it's 18-0225-P, 18-0274-P, 18-0275-P, 18-0401-P, and 19-0019-P in its entirety for agenda item 9A.
No, Mr. Chair, I so move approval.
Thank you. There is a motion to approve Exhibit A. Is there a second? Second. There is a motion and a second to approve Exhibit A for certifications. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Are there any in opposition? Motion does approve to accept Exhibit A. You can now move to Exhibit B, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Sure.
Just to be clear for Mr. Michael's concerns previously stated, it's my understanding that you have gone through all of these certifications for each and every one of these officers to make sure that they do qualify to actually be certified in the state of New Mexico.
So there's several levels that occur here, but it is a great question, if I may. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, if this is occurring at a satellite academy, which in this case it was, Western Satellite Academy, the director of that academy then attests in writing to each and every individual that completes their training program, just as in any other satellite academy in our state, including our own academy. Our basic training bureau chief, if you will, attests to the fact to the director that these individuals have completed all the requirements required in state statute as well as the Mexico Administrative Code. The Satellite Academy will then issue, or in our case, Law Enforcement Academy will issue a course completion certificate for successfully completing that block of training, being a basic academy, CBW, telecommunicator. And then right behind that, then will become the issuance of the certification if they've met those standards, right? And so it's the certification issuance is based off of us receiving that affidavit by the training director that, yep, they've met all the training requirements. And then we move forward with that process through you all as the executive secretary of the board, the director acting in that capacity, issues those certifications on your behalf.
Thank you, and it's my understanding that it would probably be likely over cumbersome for this board to be able to review each and every requirement for every officer to be able to do that in this meeting.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, that would be about 400 or so on the law enforcement officer side, probably another 200, 250 or so on the telecommunicator side, just so you have some more or less numbers.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Those questions, any other questions?
Mr. Chair, if I may, Mr. Cuss, when you present to this board, you're looking at the qualifications for certification, or the satellite director has reviewed all the qualifications for certification, with the final one being a certificate of completion. And so does the certificate of completion incorporate the other qualifications? Is the director saying, for example, this is a citizen of the United States and has reached the age of majority, hold a high school diploma or the equivalent, valid driver's license, not convicted, and so forth? Is that included with the certificate of completion?
In particular, are you discussing 29-7-6,
Yes.
Mexico State Statutes qualifications for certification? And the answer is absolutely.
Okay.
That's what that is based upon, as well as the 10 parts, depending on what part is applicable, the 10 parts of your board rules within the Mexico Administrative Code. But the answer is absolutely.
Okay, and so now as directors, we are being asked of our board to, we use the word ratify, as discussed a lot, but to approve, or to, which is the same as ratify, these certifications that have been reviewed.
Correct. And just so, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, just so you understand that qualifications for certification, 29-7-6, those are the entrance requirements to get into an academy. You don't even start an academy unless you meet those, as well as some others. But the very specific requirements articulated in 29-7-6, those must be met before an individual enters into the academy.
But the certificate of completion is the completion of the basic academy.
Correct. They've met all of those requirements on the front side, and then they've met all of the academic and physical requirements of the core curriculum.
And our agencies, including our satellites, are following, to the best of your knowledge, any statutes set forth by the legislators on what they want from the academies. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Sure, go ahead, sir.
Mr. Chair, I'm just going to jump on the bandwagon for this discussion based on the comments made by Mr. Michelle's, and I'll just refer to council. He brought up issues, and has that been reviewed by council to make sure that we are abiding by whatever is necessary for certifications for our officers? And has a determination been made that
Sure, it's an excellent question, and I will address it this way. Two things. One, you can expect a legal memo from council on the duties, requirements, and kind of the process. That's not to say that with this board's leadership or guidance, we can't change the somewhat unclear rules. All rules can always get a little better and more specific. So hopefully that memo will at least identify a couple areas if you'd like to change this process. The other area that I would offer some guidance, we use the ratification process rather than independently reviewing these. We rely on representations only to follow all the other boards and commissions generally use a ratification process, or we would ultimately independently be reviewing these for weeks, I think. So, but if there are concerns, you can expect a memo. And then number two, we can take action on any other areas of interest or follow-up that you need. If you're still concerned about whether or not the ratification process and approval meets the regulations. Do you have anything to add, Mr. Cross, to that?
No, sir. I mean, I think it's, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I think it's always good to look at the rules, right? And to continue to try to stay progressive and to continue to try to improve processes. If there's confusion, which obviously in some cases there is, then we need to seek some type of resolution so that it is no longer confusing. I don't believe it's confusing to any of our satellite academies. I don't believe it's confusing to any of the law enforcement agencies. But if it is confusing to members of the public, then obviously we have some work to do. Whether that's communication, a better explanation of what these processes are, or whether it's looking at a revision to these processes. I think both of those.
I do think, and I would share this to the new director, some of the concerns of the past. And as you know, most of us are fairly new. I've been on this board now for 5 years, but there's a cycle of turnover no matter what when you serve your term. So each new board has come in with, during the orientation process, to raise certain issues. Mr. Michelle raises one in terms of what is the approval process. In the event, we are relying on information that is coming from the academy process. And so I think you're hearing a little bit of concerns about why we're approving and what we're approving. So obviously in the areas of accuracy, we should talk a little bit about that. We don't ever want to approve incorrect information, or certifications that aren't in these batches would also be a concern. But there's somewhat our limitations though in terms of our oversight and approval because of the volume. But I would also say that we can talk a little bit about making sure that the quality control process between our board and management is sound.
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman. And exhibit or agenda item 9A would be a perfect example of that. You see that has a starting year of 18. That was placed on your last agenda for ratification. There was an error in recording one of the certification numbers. So we asked the board to skip that agenda item, and we placed it again at the top of the order here when that agenda was corrected. So, those processes are in place, but again, I think the more we can work on it, the better.
Yeah, and we do get some guidance from our boards and commissions, much like a board of regents would approve a budget, but really they rely on the accuracy of the management. And so we do have to govern, but I do take note of the board's concern that we're approving accurate information, or more importantly, ratifying that the process was completed thoroughly, and therefore these documents are only representations of the training and qualifications. I somewhat disagree slightly with Mr. Michelle's interpretation of what the document means. The document is a representation that the person is qualified. He was using terms like illegal documentation, and as you know in law enforcement, there's a whole entire process there's independent judicial determination before someone can say that, or the law enforcement officers have their own property right in terms of their own certification. So it's a complicated process, but my biggest concern is that our board be presented with accurate information, and I know you're already short-staffed, and that will be something that we'll want to work on together. Any other questions as to our ratification process at this time? Those are great questions, by the way. Mr. District Attorney, any other questions you might have? I know you're...
You got me reading the statutes.
Yep.
So, Mr. Chairman, can I interrupt?
Yes.
Coming from the public health perspective, there's two actions. I mean, I would be training the same nurses, and they would complete a course completion, but then they would practice for 2 years, and an external agency would actually do the certification. That doesn't happen here. So I think one of the things that I hear from the community representative is that it's one agency, DPS, the law enforcement academies, that are doing both the training and the certification. Am I like projecting, I know I am, but is that mindset from the public health world relevant to this issue?
Yes, that is absolutely correct. I think what we're now starting to explore, and I wanted to let you guys kind of take your own time, but there are absolute infrastructure challenges that this board, when I said policy, we do discipline, certifications, and then what I was saying is you guys develop your own agendas, come to us with your policy ideas. I think that is one critical risk that I've always known that, so for instance, as John just presented another idea, besides the accuracy of certifications, now that we're pitching around the idea that do you all want to independently investigate the LEA 90 complaint? And that to me is an infrastructure problem.
Right.
They don't have the resources. Somebody needs to do proper fact-finding on an LEA 90 complaint. But traditionally the legislature hasn't thoroughly funded that as an independent service. They should. And then you're now raising a second issue, which is and to me, I'll just give you and I'm giving you I guess my chairman's report backwards. The legislature needs to critically fund not only 911 dispatchers, but more due process and process professionals within this very complex certification and discipline process. But that is an area, you're basically doing it with duct tape, right? I mean, you don't have to give an opinion. I'll say that what your mission is. I'm worried that the board does have an oversight role, and we have a determination role legally. We don't also have the staff. I give some of my staff from my office, but we don't have independent staff to do independent verification, like you said, and or the discipline, which is. And you've already expressed some concern that you have limited resources to do independent investigation. So I guess this is going to be a shared challenge for the legislature to properly fund these divisional duties. Can you imagine some of the other commissions that have less staff that are taking away dental licenses and those? So anyway, I don't want to get on a policy soapbox here, but the board is definitely identifying accurately the lack of critical infrastructure, and so they're starting to ask questions, which is a good thing. Madam Director, I'm sorry.
Chairman and board members, that's why I'd like a little bit of time just to kind of soak into the process. The board and the directorship I held with another state are very, very similar to the setup that you all have, and I think that in my brief time, what I've seen how the processes are set up, that it is doable. I think it's a matter of understanding how they interact with each other. I'm finding that we may have a little bit of a backlog, but I think part of it is can be improved with our communication, my communication with the agencies who are sending in these concerns, and what steps we take if we have information missing, if we don't have enough information to move forward in our process to get on that, to get with them to see what we can do to get that information. And I haven't been on long enough to say that I absolutely think it's 100% doable the way it is, but I think it's a good design. I think it is set up, and once we understand how the parts interact with each other, we can get it running a little smoother.
That's fantastic. I think you still have some questions.
Well, Mr. Chair, I do have one comment or reminder, maybe for those that are not in traditional law enforcement positions, which is once a police officer is hired, commissioned, put out in the field, they have 12 months to be certified. Otherwise, they lose that commission and they can no longer be out in the field serving as a police officer. So there's also a practicality, if you will, to this, that depending upon when that officer was hired, when that officer or deputy is able to get into that academy to go through the training for certification, when they get out, and then when we actually have a board meeting, they may have gone over that 12-month period if we have to wait until this board meets to certify, which gets back to your issue of this board would have to meet much more regularly to ensure that we don't violate that and create all kinds of issues relating to that officer and his property rights and interests, as you mentioned, and what it's going to do to departments if they have to decommission people. So there's kind of a practical matter that has to be considered in this process as well, because again, after 12 months, that officer could be out of the field, or that deputy, and then we're creating even more issues. So we do have to kind of factor that into our process, whatever it may ultimately end up being if it's changed.
I would probably say that because we don't want to punish potentially all the qualified members that are eligible for certification or ratification, but I will say that any board error or management error can be judicially corrected, or we have an ability to correct through open meetings process any concerns or errors that we might accidentally ratify due to error or anything like that. So I want to calm the board a little bit. And then secondly, and I do this for a living on my other day job. I defend the state on litigation, and like I said earlier, I don't want to jump for myself. We've not been sued under my administration for violating some process or not following law. So I'm not welcoming a lawsuit from the community, but we will look at this issue as closely as we can.